My name is Edmund Hale. I have watched markets long enough to understand that the fall does not begin with panic. It begins earlier, in moments that feel ordinary, moments that pass quietly without resistance and without warning, moments that appear unremarkable at the time they occur, and moments that feel completely justified while they are happening. This is not a record of outcomes. It is a record of decisions, and the conditions that made those decisions feel reasonable before their consequences were ever visible. Nothing feels wrong when it begins. The system behaves as expected, and each decision produces familiar results. Each outcome reinforces the belief that the process remains intact. There is no interruption, no signal that demands immediate attention, and no visible reason to stop and question what has already been proven to work. Stability becomes the default expectation. The absence of disruption becomes evidence that nothing has changed. Consistency builds trust, and trust reduces hesitation. What once required careful observation now feels understood without effort. The observer begins to rely less on active awareness and more on passive confidence. This shift is subtle, and it does not feel dangerous. It feels efficient. It feels like progress. It feels like the natural result of experience accumulated over time. At first, this trust is useful. It allows decisions to be made without paralysis. It allows action to occur without constant doubt and without unnecessary delay. But over time, something begins to change, not in the environment, but in the observer. Attention becomes less precise. Observation becomes less deliberate. The mind begins to rely on expectation instead of evidence. The present is no longer examined with the same intensity, because the past has provided reassurance for too long. This transition does not feel like negligence. It feels like mastery. It feels like understanding. It feels like control. Nothing has failed yet, and because nothing has failed, nothing appears to require correction. The observer begins to assume continuity, not because continuity has been confirmed, but because it has not yet been broken. Patterns that have repeated many times begin to feel permanent. Variations that once demanded attention begin to feel temporary and insignificant. Signals that once triggered caution begin to feel routine. Confidence grows quietly, not because the environment has become safer, but because it has remained stable long enough to be trusted without question. And with confidence comes comfort. Comfort removes friction. It removes the internal resistance that once forced careful observation and deliberate thought. Decisions begin to require less effort, less verification, less scrutiny. The process becomes automatic. It becomes familiar. It becomes easy to continue without interruption. Nothing feels reckless. Nothing feels dangerous. Everything feels justified by the sequence of events that came before. The observer does not feel careless. They feel experienced. They feel prepared. They feel capable of navigating whatever comes next, because everything that has come before has reinforced their belief in the stability of the process. This is the moment when perception begins to narrow, not through denial, but through adaptation. The mind protects continuity by filtering out contradiction. Signals that do not fit the expected outcome are reinterpreted, minimized, or quietly dismissed, not intentionally, but automatically. The observer does not believe they are ignoring anything. They believe they are correctly interpreting everything. Experience becomes authority. Authority becomes certainty, and certainty removes the need to question. This is how the fall begins. Not with panic, not with confusion, not with obvious error, but with confidence that no error exists. The environment does not collapse suddenly. It changes gradually, in ways that are difficult to recognize while momentum continues forward. The observer continues to act based on expectation, not because expectation has been confirmed, but because it has not yet been disproven. Continuation feels safer than interruption. Continuity feels more logical than doubt. By the time doubt finally appears, it does not arrive as panic. It arrives as hesitation, a brief moment of uncertainty, a moment that feels unfamiliar but not yet dangerous, a moment that passes quickly because the mind prefers to restore continuity rather than confront contradiction. And so the process continues, not because it has been verified, but because it has not yet been stopped. I have seen this moment many times. It never announces itself. It never demands attention while it is happening. It only becomes visible after it has already passed, when the decision that once felt reasonable can no longer be undone. The fall does not begin with collapse. It begins here, in the quiet certainty that nothing is wrong.